My name is Joseph Buckley, and in this brief video presentation, I would like to discuss interviewing and interrogation issues for juvenile offenders. There is no doubt that research has demonstrated that a very high number of confirmed false confession cases are confessions given by juveniles. The most common causes for false confessions are threats of harm or inevitable consequences, promises of leniency, a denial of the subject's rights, denial of the opportunity to satisfy their physical needs, and oftentimes and most prevalently, conducting excessively long interrogations. So with that in mind, whenever interviewing or interrogating a juvenile offender, we recommend that the investigator adhere to the following guidelines. Number one, be sure to meet all legal requirements that apply to contacting a parent or legal guardian before initiating any questioning. A non-accusatory, non-confrontational interview should be the initial contact with the subject, giving them a chance to tell their story or their version of events or their activities during the time period in question, possibly an alibi if that's relevant, etc. Exercise caution in evaluating a young person's verbal or nonverbal behavioral responses. Due to the lack of maturity, the corresponding lack of values or sense of responsibilities, the behavior symptoms they display may not be reliable indications of their credibility. It is our general recommendation that when dealing with a person who's under the age of 10, the investigator should not engage in persuasive techniques such as theme development or alternative questions. At this age, the child is susceptible to suggestion and may be motivated to please a person in authority. The interaction between the investigator and the subject should be focused on factual information and simple logic. Most adolescents between the ages of 10 and 15 have developed a sense of social responsibility to the extent that they know if they admit committing a serious crime, they will probably suffer some consequence. For this reason, when the information from the investigation clearly indicates the subject's probable involvement of the commission of the act, persuasion techniques can be applicable and can be applied. The extent of the persuasion techniques used is not dependent on the seriousness of the crime, but rather on the maturity of the youngster. When a child is taken into custody and advised of their rights, the question of whether the child is capable of making a knowing and voluntary waiver is a very legitimate question. Certainly, individuals under the age of 10 are incapable of fully understanding the implications of waiving Miranda rights. Some younger adolescents may fall into this category as well. When a juvenile younger than 15 who has not had any prior experience with law enforcement is advised of the Miranda rights, the investigator should carefully discuss and talk about those rights with the subject rather than just recite them to make sure that they understand what the rights are and what their waiver means. If attempts to explain the rights are unsuccessful, no questioning should be conducted at that time. This is also, of course, true for somebody who's mentally or psychologically impaired. Misrepresenting evidence, lying to a subject about evidence, should be avoided when questioning a youthful suspect with low social maturity or a suspect with diminished mental capacity. These individuals may not have the fortitude or confidence to challenge such evidence, and depending on the nature of the crime, may become confused as to their own possible involvement if the investigators tell them that they have evidence clearly indicated they committed the act. The ultimate test of the trustworthiness of an admission or confession is corroboration. An admission, "I shot and killed Mr. Johnson, I forced Susie Adams to have sex with me," have very limited value without corroboration. However, these admissions become very significant if they are corroborated by information about the crime the suspect provided, which had been purposely withheld from the suspect, and or information only the suspect could have known because the police weren't even aware of it. With this discussion in mind, the following represents some factors to consider in the assessment of the credibility of a juvenile offender's confession. These issues are certainly not all inclusive, and each case must be evaluated on the totality of circumstances surrounding the questioning process and confession. But nevertheless, these are elements that should be given careful consideration. The suspect's condition at the time of questioning, their physical condition, including possible drug or alcohol intoxication, mental capacity, psychological condition, their age, their prior experience with investigators, their understanding of the language, the length of the questioning, the degree of detail provided by the suspect in their confession, the extent of corroboration between the confession and the crime, the suspect's behavior during the questioning, the effort made by the investigators to address the suspect's physical needs, and or the presence of any improper questioning techniques. For additional information about questioning juvenile offenders, make sure to visit read.com, our website, for our investigator tips. And of course, we discuss the issue extensively in our book, Criminal Interrogation and Confessions. Thank you very much for taking a few minutes to view this video presentation.